Alright, here we have my Xbox One X with power issues, and it comes on, has buzzing, shuts back off, and repeatedly does this. So this is what we're working on today. This is my first attempt at fixing something like this. So as you can see, you've got the screws on the back there. This is our first step to take those out. They are TR10 screws, as I learned. And as you can see on the very right there, there's a sticker over the screw. That's the warranty sticker, and I don't care about this because this thing's out of warranty and I've had it. It was used when I bought it anyway. But if you care, you probably should not be taking apart your Xbox. So after we get these out, the top just kind of slides back, pops off. It's got these little cleats on there a little bit to keep the plastic case kind of attached. So you got to be a little careful. And then I start taking the screws out here, which I did not end up needing to do, as I found as we got further along here. At the time I'm taking off, it looks like here, the body screws, which were the long ones. Those ones attach the entire case together, basically. And then the short ones are hooking to things that are attached to that base, which those I technically did not need to take out. But I started by watching a video of how to take Xbox One X apart, and this guy was literally taking apart everything, which I didn't know at the time, and so I made this mistake of taking all the screws out at first. I did not realize what I was doing. So yeah, I would not recommend doing that. You might want to only take out the body screws to start out, and then there's a few other things you have to detach. These screws were actually hard to take out. I ended up getting blisters on part of my hand using this tool, and in the future I definitely will use an automatic, like battery powered piece to do so, because this tool is great for like maybe a motherboard, something screws where they're not so tightly torqued down, but this was quite painful. On the left there, that's like the little part that hooks the board. It's kind of like a grounding thing over there on the left. And then on the right, we're taking apart the USB board, I think, for the front USB panel. And then on the very front, that's actually like the power button area and the eject and the pairing, which I did not need to take this off either, but this is what happened as I was watching the other videos. So I would recommend not taking these things off if you're just trying to open up and diagnose something first. I mean, obviously, if you know what's wrong and you need to take the whole thing apart, that's one thing, but that little strip there hooks to the motherboard and powers it and sends the signals back. So here I go, taking off the back and looking in, and that's like, oh no, it's the back of the motherboard. So I flip it over, and that's the power supply. Trying to take that out. It's just got these little foamy stuff that's stuck over. You can just pry it back a little bit and it'll come right off. Just be careful. So I'm taking off the fan, the shroud there, and the fan. Then there goes the disk drive, and there goes the hard drive. And they're just plugged in with SATA cables and a power cable. It's fairly common looking. So here I go to test out the old power supply. Basically, I just plugged it in to see if it was buzzing. And then I realized, okay, this is what I need to do. I had ordered this power supply from iFixit, and we're just going to replace that. Now that I realize, I'm pretty sure that was the issue because it was buzzing. So we're going to have to put everything back in the case because of accidentally taking it all out. And this would have been a lot easier, like I said, if I didn't take this whole stupid thing apart and make that mistake. So hopefully this helps you guys to not do that if you're going to take your Xbox apart just to replace the power supply. This is definitely not a how-to video necessarily, but... Alright, so I'm putting the fan shroud back on. And just plugging that in. Alright, and then we're putting the hard disk back on, plugging that in, the power and the SATA cable. And then the disk drive goes back in there on top, and they just kind of sit there, you know, and then you got this power supply. You know, you just kind of sit, you have to push it in there. Apparently I took it off and moved it out of the way because I needed to move the fan out of the way in order to kind of put it under and plug it back in. And you want to plug it back in to the motherboard and then flip it over and then screw the screws back in just for that. That way, you know, it's lined up and everything, because if you don't do that and then you get further and it's not lined up, you won't be able to plug the Xbox in. So I did that first and then went back to like fitting all these things. You make sure the pegs are kind of attached and put the back on, or the top, I should say, case. I don't know. I believe that's the top case. There's only a few screws that need to go back in there at first. There are 2 small screws. Then we can go back to the tedious part of screwing every single thing back in. I put the front board back on first, and the sides, screwed those both in after the case was kind of put back together, which isn't that difficult. The front one, though, trying to hook this little strip back into this is a huge pain in the butt. I don't know if there's a better way to do this, but all I can tell you is I struggled for a bit to do that. I mean, I didn't keep it there, but you can see, I mean, it took me actually quite a while to get this back in. And, you know, we're just screwing back everything we took off, screw back in. So all the body screws are kind of like the big, you could see through to where you can't see the motherboard. And that's where you can tell that those go back into. Obviously, if you're taking something like this apart and you have a hard time remembering where to put things, you should probably take a picture and diagram it or write it down or something, because, you know, you're going to have problems later. But there's only a few types of screws, so it's not too ridiculous to remember how to put it together. If you're familiar with building things like this, you know, in general, like building computers and stuff. But so it probably took me like 10 minutes to screw all these screws back in. Obviously, we're speeding this up for sake of sanity here. We get these all back in here. I'll definitely be doing a review about that toolkit, since now I've actually got to use it. I do have some comments about it. You can see we slide the top back in. You know, you got to be careful. You don't want to force it or you'll break the plastic things. We get this thing back together and put the screws in the back on. And we're hoping, of course, that actually fixed it. So I plugged it in. And here we go. And it comes back on and doesn't shut off. It's amazing. The buttons make noise. And there you have it.